Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. So thank you, Bronwyn, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
You're welcome.
So you are, in layman's terms, I guess, like an anger expert, helping people deal with anger and the psychotherapist type of emotional issues and things that come up with people, correct?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the anger expert because no one else is touching it. And
Yeah.
it is so confusing to everyone. People who are religious were very confused about it. People who are secular. I mean, just no one knows what to do with anger. And also, I've really come to believe now as a therapist that I think actually all anxiety, all depression, all mental illness stems from suppressed anger.
Yeah. And so when did this become something for you to be like, this is something that I'm passionate about and called to help people with?
I think just as soon as about the time I got licensed as a therapist, and it just became the common denominator. I mean, I just kept seeing it over and over and over.
Yeah.
You hear people talk about like, oh, they have big feelings. And I don't know if you've heard that expression. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, that just means anger. Like, why don't we just say anger? Because
Nice.
we're not talking about sadness. Sadness like doesn't overwhelm people to the same degree. Like, what else are we talking about? It's anger. And also like, a lot of people in the mental health community, unfortunately, make it worse because they do certain kinds of techniques like dialectical behavioral therapy, for example, where they teach people to manage their anger. And so what ends up happening, I know this isn't their intention, but what ends up happening, what I see when those people who were given those techniques end up coming to me for therapy, is they have internalized that if they could just manage their anger better, everyone else would be okay, and that they're the problem. And so it reinforces that anger is my problem and not an actual like light on the dashboard of your car saying, warning, something's really off base.
Right.
And you need to check under the hood and repair whatever is wrong. So it becomes an intrapersonal problem instead of like a relational problem, which it always is. And there's just so much, even within the mental health community, just things that really make me angry because they're not helping. They're actually making it worse in so many ways, often.
And so, because I think we've all heard that anger management piece, right? Like that, like manage your feelings, manage your anger. And a lot of times in preparing for this, one of the things I was thinking about was that like, we don't hear people say, manage your joy. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, be as joyful as you can be. And like, oh, be like all these things. But it's like, oh, but manage manage your sadness, manage your anger, manage those feelings.
Yeah.
When it's like feelings are feelings, right? Like, so we should express them. Maybe not always as we feel we should, right? Because if you're so angry, you want to just yell at everybody. That's probably not the best solution.
Well, I think that's what everyone immediately jumps to. Oh, if I express my anger, I'm going to be violent or violent with my words. And, we've all witnessed that. And that is scary. And I that's not what I'm proposing, of course. But yeah. And so we think either it's like that or we manage and stuff it. And it's like, we're making this false dichotomy. There's a lot more we can do with anger than those two things. And, you saying no one says like suppress your joy. I mean, but there's two therapists that they're a married couple that were really fundamental in my training when I was an intern. They are the Yurkoviches, Kay and Mylan Yurkovich, and they use a term that I love. I think they are the ones who made it up, and it is what's shareable is bearable, and that's with feelings. What's shareable is bearable, and like even with joy isn't meant to be just felt internally. It's meant to be shared. That's how like humans are designed to express that, and we all want to get on board with that, or most of us, but we don't allow that for anger. And what anger needs to be expressed into words and validated, usually the person we're angry at will never do the validation. Occasionally they will. So we can find someone else who can just hear us and validate us and just go, yeah, you have every right to feel that way. And that is bearable. But also anger is meant to be expressed as far as assertiveness and boundaries. And that's really the healthy way we express it. Instead of stuffing it.
Right. And so to back up to like, is there a common cause for anger? Like, is there a root that's like, and maybe not common is in the fact of like, it's the same exact thing, like, but is there a common realm of issues that like cause anger for people?
Yeah, I do believe there is. I think that ultimately it's feeling betrayed by someone. And that's the deepest, most, provocative kind of anger. So if you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you off, yeah, we all get angry, but we usually get over it pretty fast because we weren't betrayed by someone we trusted. That's just a total stranger. But to feel betrayed by someone you trusted, someone in authority, a parent, a boss, your spouse, that, and if we're not able to express that and externalize it, it will stick around in our bodies, and it will create depression and anxiety and panic and all kinds of a host of mental illnesses.
And so like you should stick around in our bodies, and I've heard that before, but like how does that, and you mentioned earlier, when you suppress our anger, we suppress our feelings, and I think we've all, whether we've been told to do that is growing up, right? Like, boys don't cry or those types of things. But we've all gotten to the point, or sometimes in the workplace, like, oh, you're not supposed to feel that way here. Like, hold those feelings down. You do that something else. But when we do that manifestation from a physical standpoint, right? That's a real thing, right? That's just not like a made up.
Yes. And the funny thing is, my first career was in nutrition. My first master's degree is actually in nutrition. And back in the day, I was all about, if everyone just changed their diet, we'd get rid of all these headaches and migraines and chronic illnesses and autoimmune. And nutrition does play a huge role. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but now I'm like, I have had clients that had migraines for over a decade who came to me, and we got rid of them in a period of, a few months. And it was absolutely linked to when they started suppressing their anger. Like, for example, in middle school, when their parents said, you can't be angry anymore, you need to grow up now. And all of a sudden the anger gets internalized. And, they had migraines. I see it all the time. It's crazy. I believe a lot of autoimmune disorders are stemming from suppressed anger. I believe a lot of insomnia. I myself had insomnia on and off, but pretty bad for the majority of 30 years. Now I'm finally sleeping like a baby. And that's because I finally created a boundary with my own father. And I'm finally at peace. But I think what we're doing is, what happens is when someone betrays us, but we're not allowing ourselves to recognize it or really see it and have our eyes open, then what happens when we stay in relationship with that person in ways that don't create healthy boundaries, we end up betraying ourselves. And I believe when we betray ourselves, that anger at ourselves, now that regret or, that self-inflicted anger is what haunts us the most. So the headaches, the autoimmune disorders, the insomnia, I believe that's us betraying ourselves.
That's I'm like, wow, that's a huge point, because it's, and immediately I think of like, we've all probably had that experience where you're dating the wrong person and you can't see it, but everybody else is telling you they're the wrong person for you, or,
Yeah.
why are you still in this relationship, or those types of things. And it, but we're turning that on ourselves when we're not dealing with the anger. It's like we're staying in it. And, so that's where, having, whether it's a trusted person that you can vent to, whether it's a spouse or a best friend, or having a counselor to go to, is like a huge piece of the puzzle, right? In order to get past that, because it's hard for us to sometimes it's hard for us to get that deep just on our own.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is really salient. I think that we are all blind to ourselves at the end of the day, and we need what we need. And what I do as a therapist is, what we need most, first and foremost, is a mirror, a true mirror, to give us a true reflection. Now, there's a lot of people in our lives, unfortunately, who will give us distorted reflections of ourselves. But we need someone who we can trust, who's going to give us a true reflection. And we need, other people. That's why we don't do well in isolation or with people we don't trust, right? To see ourselves and to trust them, to trust ourselves, so we don't continue to betray ourselves, so that we can really be true to ourselves at the end of the day. And I believe our relationship with ourself is of fundamental importance, primary importance. And that is what sets us free from mental illness and sickness.
Yeah. Well, and I fully agree with that, because I think if we don't live our lives to our values, and understand that, we can't make everybody happy. Like, if you're in there trying to please everybody, you're going to wind up with issues. Like, and so like,
yes.
And so looking at it and going, okay, well, here's what I value. And sometimes that means dealing with the tough stuff to figure out what you value, right?
To figure out what you value. Yeah. To be true to yourself. Yeah. So, codependency, a lot of people hear that term and no one seems to really understand what it means. A lot of people confuse it with like dependency, which is different. But really, I'm writing something right now about codependency. And I have a whole podcast called Unrooting Codependency. It's very common, very, very common. But it's basically how I define it is a lack of boundaries ultimately. And the most important boundary is when the most important boundaries we could possibly have are invisible, and they are our feelings are our responsibility alone, and everyone else's feelings are their responsibility. We are only responsible for our own feelings. We are not responsible for someone else's disappointment by our choice. Like, those feelings belong to them. Their disappointment is theirs, not ours. And a lot of us were raised, don't disappoint mom and dad. Mom and dad are God. They really are the first God of a child, whether that child's raised in a religious faith tradition or not. They see their parents as God, and they can't disappoint. And if we have a parent who reinforces that and we feel compelled to win their approval, we are enslaved to that. That's compulsive, and we cannot be true to ourselves, because we're going to feel responsible for their feelings. And when you feel responsible for another person's feelings, now we are responsible to other people, but that's different than for. But when we feel responsible for other people, it's mutually exclusive. We can't actually be responsible for ourselves. You have to pick. It's an either or. And I always tell people, like, you can live your life trying to make everyone happy or, not disappoint them or whatever, but you will die trying. And it's actually not possible, is it? It's actually impossible to be responsible for someone else's feelings. Yeah.
No, and that's something that my wife and I learned several years ago, and I've seen it said multiple times. It's like, if you're in a relationship with another person, if you're trying to spend all your time trying to make them happy,
Mhm.
you're gonna just be spinning your wheels. And
Mhm.
if you make yourself happy first and
Mhm.
then do things that you both enjoy to do, you're gonna
Mhm.
wind up everybody's gonna wind up being happy because you're doing things that make both of you happy versus
I
trying to make them happy by doing
yeah,
like,
I see. Well, that is true for like a healthy other person. There
right.
are plenty of people who actually want you to feel responsible for their feelings.
Hmm.
They want to outsource their disappointment to you as a
Right.
way to manipulate you to get
Hmm.
you to please them, right?
Right. Right.
So there's plenty of that too.
Yeah.
So a healthy person is going to be like, hey, Jerry, you do you. That's awesome. I celebrate that. I respect that. You are your own independent individual, and I support you, and I will wait for you, and we can
Hmm.
do this together. That's what we call a safe person.
Right. Right. And so, as opposed to the person who is anger inside and doesn't know how to deal with it and is just waiting for that moment to pounce and twist the relationship.
To
Right.
twist it, yeah. So we could call those people like emotionally immature or
Hmm.
narcissistically inclined, but there are so many people, like even with a look of disapproval, they're trying
Right.
to, like, for example, let's say like you go to a restaurant. Let's say you're a server in a really nice restaurant, and there's someone there at the restaurant who's ordering, and they're asking, oh, is my favorite, off the menu item available today? And you're like,
Hmm.
oh no, actually it's not available today. I'm sorry. And then they roll their eyes, right? They roll
Right.
their eyes at you. So our behavior is a form of communication. It's a
Oh
language.
yeah.
And so what are they communicating? They are wanting you, the waiter, to feel responsible for their feelings. That's what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And if it works, you're going to go, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, you know what? I'll throw in a free hummus and chips today. I'll throw in this. What else can I do? It will
Yeah.
work to manipulate you if you don't recognize what's going on, if you feel responsible for their feelings. But if you stand there and you have this like inner dialogue and you go, they want me to feel responsible for their feelings and to kind of work the situation and kind of manipulate it. And that's what's going on. But I'm reminding myself right now that those feelings of disappointment they're having belong to them, not me.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not responsible for those feelings. I'm responsible to this person, but not for her.
Right.
I can say, oh, I see that you're not happy with that. That's a bummer. So I'm going to go away and I'll come back in 5 minutes. And if there is something that we have today that you'd like to offer, you can let me know that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something in there in the dialogue and it's a common phrase that I've stopped saying on purpose when situations when it's like, okay, there's no reason for me to apologize. Like
Yeah.
I think it's super common in our society to when we don't know what to say to just
Mm.
go, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you apologizing?
Yeah.
Like, you had that, and I think that's what it is. Like you explained it. It's that we don't know how to approach someone else's feelings and deal with it. And so we automatically apologize because we felt like we caused it.
Yeah, if we feel like we did, and they definitely want us to, because it's kind of a power game, right? It's
Hmm.
it's that woman is kind of saying, I'm the powerful one, and you have to submit to me or humble yourself before me. And if you say, I'm so sorry, then it worked. Even
Right.
that piece works. Like she feels powerful at
Hmm.
your expense. And again, I sound like really cynical of humanity, and I am, honestly.
Hmm.
I didn't start out that way, but I have come to really see all these power dynamics being played out in ways that are kind of subtle, but you start to see the patterns and you start to see them over and over.
Hmm.
And it really comes down to, us knowing where our boundaries are, where we begin and end, and being
Yeah.
responsible for ourselves. And that disarms that power dynamic.
Right. And that boundary piece,
Mm-hmm.
you you really do have to work on it on yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's having someone come alongside you and help you understand it, but like you really have to work on that yourself and be willpower is the wrong word. Discipline sort of makes it sound like it's like but it's like you really have to be able to stick to them as well
Mm-hmm.
and not be wishy-washy. It's like once
Mm-hmm.
you have them, they're like a concrete wall boundary that you need to have
Mm,
that
yeah.
says, no, here's my space, that's your space, and
Yeah.
that's it, correct?
Yeah. And one thing that really helps is when you do it, it feels really good. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Hmm.
Like you're kind of saying you've worked on it yourself. Can you
Hmm.
speak to that? Like, did you feel kind of like relieved or a little bit powerful in a good way when you did that yourself or when
Yeah,
you learned?
well, and one of the things is like, okay, well, I don't need to know all this other stuff. Like, and when you get together with family, I mean, we just had the holidays, you get together with family, and people are all upset and they're talking about, oh, this and this and this, and are upset about, what's going on in the
Mm,
world. And I'm like,
mm,
well, my boundary says none of that stuff matters to me because it doesn't
yeah.
affect me on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Like, like it doesn't, like I feel bad that people are put in harm's way or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like on a day-to-day basis, that's not affecting me in any way. And so like
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that emotional swing connected to it
Mm-hmm.
because whether the news told me to have it or
Yeah.
coworkers or
Yeah.
whoever, like
Yeah.
I'm like, no, and
Well,
I think I
yeah.
sleep better because of it.
Yeah. So boundaries bring freedom,
Mhm.
and they bring peace and they bring order, right?
Right,
Versus chaos. And so you having that boundary, like you're saying it doesn't affect me, but you're also like conversely, there's nothing you can actually do about it
right,
anyway. So having that
right,
boundary is also really good to be like, well, if I could do something, I would, but I can't. So I'm just gonna have this boundary because like otherwise it's just gonna like get under my skin and for no fruit. It would be completely
right,
unproductive. It would only affect me, and that would be really a stupid thing to do.
right.
So I'm gonna have this boundary. And yeah, it brings order, it brings freedom, it brings peace.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so to get back to anger, is that something that like when we don't have that boundary and
Hmm.
that stuff that gets under you festers
Yes.
and it might not be the thing that you're angry about, but is it just like the snowball effect of so many emotions going on that it's like that one little bitty trigger is like the last thing and like boom, everything blows up?
Give me more of what you're asking.
Well,
Can you
like if
repeat that?
you've got so much going on because you're worried about things in society and the world and all these
Mm,
things, and
mm,
there's this little bitty trauma that you haven't dealt
mm,
with, say your parents, and
mm,
then something happens over a get together and you
mm.
go ballistic when
Uh,
really the response shouldn't have been that big, but you're so emotional about all the other things going on in the world that you blow up at your parents because you're like this, that, or the other thing that happened from before, when it's like really that shouldn't have been that big of a deal.
well, being with our parents at any age is a huge, there's no such thing as a little trigger with our parents. There could be something
Glad you
that
said that.
happens that looks small
Hmm.
on the outside objectively, but it's not a little trigger to us.
Right.
Um, I like to say triggers are like landmines, that you don't know where they are, and all of a sudden one comes up, and
Yeah.
you've just reverted to like 8-year-old Jerry.
Right.
You're not adult Jerry anymore.
Yeah.
And young Jerry is like angry because he just experienced something that like really echoed something he experienced for, the first 18 years of his life,
Right.
and it's still there, and he's just like regressing, and he's angry because he never got to express that anger with a boundary. And it's like it's haunting us,
Hmm.
um, but it also shows us that there's still stuff there that hasn't been dealt with too.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
And so those traumas don't have to be huge, right? They don't have to be, and they don't have to be something that your spouse or best friend or significant whoever like truly understands. Like it can be like, why are you upset about that?
Totally,
Right?
because a trigger is that what we are experiencing in the present is something, again, that's echoing from the past. And it makes the present, our reaction in the present, disproportionate to the objective reality, right? So, so my trigger, and a lot of people's triggers, is like rejection. My trigger used to be any hint of feeling excluded or rejected or not wanted. And, when I experienced any little hint, even perceived in my mind from my parents, oh my God, like I couldn't function. I was like, I couldn't even like talk because I was just so triggered, right? And that would make sense that showed up with a lot of people, but it was the worst when I was around them because they were the ones who planted that in the first place. And so I had to do my own work around that.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. And so when we look at people we have relationship with, if we're on the other side, right, we're not the angry person, we're the healthy person, and we've dealt with things, but we have that person in our life that we consider the angry person, right? That for whatever reason, whatever situation, they may not start out that way, but within 10 or 15 minutes of the conversation, the anger comes out and you're just like, then like, how can we as the other person help the anger person?
So are you talking about people who are just like always upset about something, not necessarily you when you're with them? They're not angry at something you did. They're just like upset about something, but it's always something, that kind of thing?
Yep.
Okay. Well, wow, that sounds like a really fun person to be around, Jerry. I don't know.
I think a lot of people cut that person out of their life eventually, right? It's like, okay, I just don't want to deal with you anymore. But sometimes you can't because they're family member.
Oh, you can cut out family members. So I have a whole podcast on that too, actually. But so let's look at this, because there are, like I said, there are patterns in people. You start to see these patterns, and there are a lot of people who won't come to therapy. These are the people who just want to vent, and they won't come to someone like me for therapy. Why? Because they know I'll let them vent, and then eventually I'll like have a challenge or something I want them to do, and they don't want that. They just want an audience and they want some empathy, but they don't want you or anyone else or me or you. If you say, hey, have you thought about they'll be like, oh no. They'll always find a reason they can't do whatever it is you're suggesting to improve whatever they're complaining about. And these are people who, kind of have what we call a victim mentality. They're always the innocent victim of everyone else. They never did anything wrong. Is this like resonating with what you're okay?
Yeah.
And so when you think about that, if that's their pattern, if you start to see these patterns, they're not going away. There's no fixing this person. They want to be the helpless victim that did no wrong. They want you to be their empathy audience and be like, oh, that's so hard. And they don't want to change. They don't want to, I talked earlier about opening our eyes to ourselves, being blind to ourselves. This person really wants to stay blind to themselves. They don't want to see themselves. They want to see themselves only as this victim. So, so I would say to you, Jerry, I hear that you want to help them, but is your just listening and empathizing as their audience, is that productive in any way? Is that actually helping them?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it gives them an avenue to vent, but if you come alongside and say, oh, and you empathizing, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not and all those things. Like I said, I don't say I'm sorry anymore because like unless I caused the problem, I understand you have feelings, but you need to look at other options to overcome some of those things.
But they're not willing.
But they're not willing to do that. And that's where that, I think when I've had those conversations with people, that's when the anger comes up. It's like, who are you to tell me that? Who are you to da, da, da?
Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah, right. And so when you think there's no actual, there's nothing productive you have to offer them, all they want, and this is again a power dynamic because it's all about them. They really don't want to hear about your struggles. They might listen just as long as it takes to make it about them again.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about them, and you really don't have anything to offer besides being their empathy audience, and they're kind of using you. And so when you start to like back up and look at big picture, is this fruitful? Is it productive? No, it's actually not helping them, and it's not helping me.
Right.
So why am I doing this over and over just because we share a bloodline? I don't know. Like, is that worth it? Maybe not.
Yeah.
So what people who don't want to see themselves, what they need most of all is the mirror. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want the mirror. But with someone like that, I might say, so if I give them a true reflection, that's what they don't want, but it
Right.
also disarms them. So I can say, wow, Joe, you're just always upset about something, huh? And it's always, you're just always upset and nothing can ever improve. And you're
Right.
like helpless even, so if I have like the ego strength to say that, because I'm
Right.
okay with Joe never talking to me again, because I've really
Yeah.
evaluated, I'm actually okay with Joe never talking to me again. That wouldn't be a bad thing at all. If I say that, that kind of puts Joe in his place, and he realizes, oh, I can't just expect Bronwyn to be my empathy audience anymore.
Right.
If I'm looking for that, I can't go to her. I got to go to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really good way to kind
Yeah.
of stop that dynamic.
No, I like that because it basically draws a line in the sand of like you can go complain to anybody you want to, but not here anymore. Like
Yeah.
keep that on the other side. And if you want to come and have a relationship, we can talk and communicate, but I'm not going to be that sounding board for that anymore.
Well, yeah, and that is what narcissistically inclined people will do, because they're
Mm-hmm.
using you, they're objectifying you. They don't want to know the three-dimensional Jerry.
Right.
They want one dimension of you, just the one that listens and goes, oh, they don't want the rest of you. And that is really sick.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And that's not a relationship, really.
It's not a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, not at all. Um,
No.
but those situations can, if you don't understand them and acknowledge them and see them for what they are,
Mm-hmm.
you can also then become the angry person
Mm.
because your feelings aren't being heard because they're not,
Mm.
and so then that anger drives up in you but you're stuffing it because they don't want to hear it, right? And so
The
like,
resentment, the
yeah,
resentment's building, and it stores up in our bodies, and it will leak out with other people that feel like safe people
mm-hmm,
to let it leak out on. And so
right,
now it's spilling over to people like your children, and you're like, wait, this isn't fair to them.
right,
I'm like selling myself, I'm betraying myself by giving Joe all this face time, and now my resentment's spilling over to innocent people. This is really, it's like affecting me in so many ways.
yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then of course it starts to show in chronic disease issues and
Mm-hmm. Yep.
mental health issues
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is seeing a counselor, and you mentioned that some of the therapies don't maybe they're just a band-aid, but they're not really,
Mm-mm.
they're just I what I would also equate to is like some of the pharmaceuticals is like, okay, well, they'll get rid of your symptom, but the root cause is still there. Like
Yes.
if somebody realizes that they're in that situation, they need to find somebody. How do they find somebody that is
Mm-hmm.
actually going to approach it the correct way?
You mean a therapist?
A therapist, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually became a therapist later in life because I myself fell into a very, very severe depressive episode. And I desperately needed a therapist, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find a good one. And I
Yeah.
went to many, and, I was at the point where I was hardly functioning, and I was just so depressed. And I'm sitting there going, I can barely do anything, but I'm pretty sure I'd be a better therapist right now than this person. And yeah, I literally
Wow.
had that thought with multiple therapists. And that actually galvanized me to go back to
Yeah.
graduate school again later in life, like I said, and get my own degree, master's in
Yeah.
counseling, and pursue that. But yeah, they are hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say someone in the first session, if my therapist is talking about herself I would run out screaming. I'd be like, oh no.
Right.
Okay, that's really not a good sign. If all she's doing is just listening, okay, no. I need to hear some really good questions that are showing me she really knows what to hear, what she wants to listen, that she has something she's really wanting to know.
Yeah.
If my therapist is challenging my feelings, like I just had a client yesterday tell me she ended up getting migraines, this client, like 9 months ago, because she sought out a therapist when she was really depressed. And she said this therapist, she felt judged by the therapist, and the therapist was like judging and kind of shaming her for
Yeah.
everything she was sharing. And then I go, oh yeah, you got migraines because of your internalized rage at this therapist. I mean, here you are in such a vulnerable state and with your own depression, and you're trusting this person who's now judging and shaming you. Oh my God. So yeah. So if I went to a therapist, the first thing I would look for is she or he really listening, asking good questions, wanting to know more? Is she validating my feelings?
Right.
Is she like, yeah, I can see why you're angry? Is she focused on feelings? I don't want to hear a lecture. I don't want to hear managing my anger. I want to hear like, just empathy and then validation and, really a focus on that.
Right. And I would assume it's important to, because I do this from a health coaching perspective and an exercise coach perspective, is I meet people where they're at the beginning. And so like, I don't expect somebody who is coming to me who's, 300 pounds and hasn't exercised in 10 years to do the same thing that one of my high school athletes comes to me and is trying to get a college scholarship. Like, we're not going to do the same thing in the first week.
Yeah.
Right. And so like meeting you where you're at versus saying, okay, well, here's the program that we have. We're just going to go step by step, and hopefully you can catch up to where step number one is. Right. That's a big bad sign, right?
Yes, that is a very big, and again, that goes back to like the dialectical behavior. That's DBT therapy. You hear a lot about that, or CBT. A lot of that is like kind of what you're saying. It's these are what you need to do, like a broad base blanket approach. But you don't know where people are at as a therapist unless you're really listening. I mean, really getting to know them. And there's getting to know someone here, and there's getting to know someone here, and there's getting to know, like, you're helping that person to get to know themselves by listening, by asking questions. While people are talking, they're like, I didn't even realize this until now when I'm saying this. Oh my God. Like, they're having their own revelations about themselves. And that's deep insight and understanding. And we need to go deep. And that happens through talking and listening.
Yeah. And having the right person that you trust help guide you through that, because as a coach myself, like, the last thing I want to do is just tell someone, because I mean, I can, because I know what the body, like the cell wants nutrition wise, like, go eat this. But, and I don't know how many people I've told this. I'm like, I can give you a meal plan to eat next week that's going to be 100% healthy, and it's going to, but it'll backfire 100% of the time, because it doesn't address where you're at today and how you're going to feel when you make that change and do all those things, right? And so having that person that can go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to go there just yet, because we need to address these things first. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's so funny because CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, they're like, oh, you're depressed, you should hang out with friends and be more social, and you should eat better, and you should like exercise, and all those things are great. But if you tell someone, again, it comes down to your relationship with yourself. And when you're constantly betraying yourself, and what we call not attuning to yourself, you're attuning to everyone else, but you're not attuning to you, and you are basically suppressing yourself, you're not in a good relationship with yourself, you're not able to nurture yourself. And exercise and good diet is nurture those things. And what I have found is that with my clients, when they start to change their relationship to themselves, and they start to attune to themselves and love themselves. I don't even like the statement, put yourself first. I don't even like that. It's really about just attuning to yourself and trusting yourself and being true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there needs to be a first or a second or a third, like, anyway, but doing all that, when my clients get these breakthroughs, they'll come back to me the next session and be like, I started gardening and I'm going to farmers markets and I'm cooking and I'm exercising. And I'm like, what? They don't need anyone to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
But they're starting to want to nurture themselves, and it's coming from within. And it's just so powerful. So I feel like a lot of therapy puts the cart before the horse, which is not sustainable. And people will do it naturally when they start to really want to self-nurture and self-attune.
Well, and I think I resonate with that. And I think that goes back to one of the things that I tell people from an exercise standpoint is like, hey, running's my thing, but it's not necessarily your thing. Like, do the thing that makes you happy and excited. And it might take you a little while to find that.
Yeah.
Right. But when you're addressing yourself and loving yourself and saying, I want to do something to make myself better, healthier, physically fit, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
Then I think what I've seen in people that say that and do that is that they naturally gravitate to something.
Yes. I like to say, listen to your body. So I had a client, she's like, I started walking, but then while I was walking, I started running here and there, like, little spurts. She goes, my body just wanted to run for short periods. I'm like, that you're listening to your body, you're attuning to your body. And, other people are like, my body wants to dance, my body wants to swim, so it's really, it really is one and the same.
Yeah. And so like, there's obviously a need to know our feelings and a need to understand our feelings and a need to address our feelings, but it's also not to say we can't have those feelings, right? We should feel every spectrum, every range of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of understanding ourselves and giving ourselves grace to say, okay, it's okay to be angry in this situation. Don't let it last forever. Right?
Well, yeah. So for example, if I'm angry, again, if I see that as feelings inform us. They give us really good information. So if let's say I go get a haircut and I'm feeling kind of like angry with the woman who's like scheduled to cut my hair, like, instead of ignoring it, I can validate it, like you're saying, but I can also go, why am I feeling this way right now? Like, oh, I don't think I'm trusting her. There's something about her. I don't know what it is. My gut is just like not, maybe, so my anger or my feeling in that moment can inform me like, I just don't think I really want to get my hair cut with this woman. And I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling comfortable or whatever, excuse myself. So feelings inform us. And so if I'm angry, like at my husband, again, like I can validate my anger, but I can go, what is this anger all about? How can I resolve it? What is the root problem here? And really like work towards that resolution. What is the root problem? Is it that I'm feeling like he is not really listening and understanding me? Yeah. Okay. I can use my words and be assertive with him and say, I feel like you're not really listening right now. Is that because this isn't a good time for me to tell you this? Like, or is this triggering you? Are you feeling a certain way? Like, let's figure this out. Let's like work together to find a resolution.
Well, and I like both of those points and examples, because I think a lot of people, whether it's busyness or a commitment or non-confrontational, we think something's going to happen, would get in that hairdressing situation and be like, well, I'm already here. I don't, and then get a cut that they knew instinctively was not going to be what they really wanted, and then fester over it for 2 weeks while it grew out to a point where they'd be like, okay, now it's finally okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's 2 weeks of their life that hair has, like, I don't want to say like totally messed up their life, but it's caused, it's taken up some of their space when it didn't need to.
Right. Right. So
right?
when you're sitting in that chair and you're not feeling comfortable, if you are feeling responsible for the hairstylist's feelings instead of being responsible for your feelings and not able to have that boundary and go, you know what, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work right now, then it will affect you in the end.
Yeah.
It absolutely will.
Yeah. And then the other piece about, the conversation with your spouse is it's true that that timing piece is huge.
Yeah.
And in understanding that, and it's not what I've learned with my wife. It's not a matter of her feelings are better than my feelings, or yeah, but it's a timing of she's not in a space to hear this right now.
Mm.
And so we can have this conversation, but it'll probably escalate to a place that I don't need it to be, or it doesn't need to be, because it's just not that
Mm-hmm.
important or that big of an issue, or and so understanding that balance, and that comes with, obviously, with learning the people that you're in a relationship with,
Mm-hmm.
and spending time with them and having that trust, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, I can look back. We'll be married 24 years this year, and so I can look back to conversations we've had in the last year and conversations we had as newlyweds and be like, oh wow, I was stupid back then.
Well, we grow up in relationships.
Yeah.
But sometimes we could be talking to someone like a spouse that we've known for so long, and we were like, why are you having this reaction right now? And then they don't know why they're having that reaction to what we're saying. And it
Mm-hmm.
turns out something is evocative to them, like they're kind of stuck, right? So
Yeah.
by talking through that and taking time and being like, what's going on, and like you're saying, giving grace, like, what's going on for you right now? It seems like you're having a reaction that's disproportionate here, or you're not able to
Mm-hmm.
hear what I'm saying, and that's not like you, and what's happening, instead of just like making assumptions,
Right.
but checking those assumptions, like, are you feeling a certain way now? Is this like too evocative for you somehow? Tell me what's going on. And maybe she doesn't even know. She's not even aware. And she needs to
Right.
like talk through it with you and be like, oh, yeah, actually, I am feeling guilt now that you're saying this. It's triggering my own guilt at another situation. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's why like humans need words, and we need to talk things out and give ourselves time and to trust ourselves, and with people we trust, to like, we can learn so much about ourselves. And I also think about reflection just in general. I'm not a big proponent of meditation as far as what I know meditation to mean, but
Mm-hmm.
reflection to me, it doesn't mean like sitting in silence. Reflection to me, I run to, not like
Mm-hmm.
you, but I'll go for a run or even a walk. And all of a sudden, like my brain, I think there's something with being outside that
Mm-hmm.
your brain like starts to reflect more on
Yep.
things. And I'll have like this reflection. Oh, when I got angry at my daughter yesterday, I'll get an insight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to
Yep.
give ourselves time and space to reflect on the fight we had with our daughter, on, ourselves, on
Right.
what we're bringing to every dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, that reflection is like so helpful for having insight, self-awareness, insight,
Mm-hmm.
and just having our eyes open. And we
Yeah.
can't just even come to a therapist to get that. I think we all need to do that on our own as well. I think that
Yeah.
would behoove all of us to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I know a lot of people are proponents of journaling,
Mhm.
or, quiet time. And I recommend that to people as well. It's like, pick the one that fits for you. But yeah, getting away from the phone, getting away from
Mhm.
television and social media, and just saying, and it doesn't have to be long, but like you said, just having that time to reflect and just
Mhm.
not just be quiet to be quiet's sake, but
Yes.
to think, okay, where am I? What's going on? What
Yes.
am I dealing with? Like, to level the foundation for the next 24 hours or however long. Because once I started doing that, it was like, oh my gosh, my emotions are so much better. Like,
Mm.
the big swings are not there anymore. It's like
Mm.
I can handle things. And not to say that I don't get angry, I get angry, right? And
Yeah.
I have sadness, I have different things that I express those emotions. but I think now I know a lot more where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially reflecting on the things that we don't want to reflect on. I mean, if we can do that, I have learned so much about myself through, especially my arguments with my daughter. She's 20 now. Oh my God. Like I had reflections. I gained so much insight about myself reflecting on our conflicts an hour or two after the fact, that I was like, I've been doing this my whole life with everyone, but I'm able to see it now with her.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've been doing these things since I was a kid, and I didn't see it until now. So yeah, and that's given me the wherewithal to really own my own stuff and apologize to her and win back her trust and tell her, you know, you're welcome to hold me accountable with this. And that's repaired our relationship a lot. And I'm modeling for her what a relationship looks like, and having that self-awareness and humility to own our own, you know, issues as well.
Right. Well, and I want to be respectful of your time. And it's been a great conversation. You've given us a lot of great information, and also just insight into how to help ourselves through some of these things that we're dealing with. So how can someone like follow you, get in touch with you if they have questions or want more information about things that you're doing?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Angry at the Right Things.
Okay.
And it's found wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. I have the last two on video on YouTube as well. So my last two podcasts, but I cover everything I've shared today. How else? Yeah, I guess I'm just on Facebook. Besides that, I haven't really marketed myself through that too much, but I am on Facebook, and yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll link the podcast for sure. So people can subscribe to that and follow along. And because I think it's something that, you know, both through our conversation, but through researching before, you know, it's like, it's definitely something that I see a lot of people not having the proper tools to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, like you said before, it's like, and a lot of counselors are not helping in the right way, you know, and so if, and anger is one of those emotions that we're all going to have.
Sure.
And if we don't know how to deal with it, it causes bigger problems than it probably should.
Yeah. Right. And I think really imperative is to know anger is not a bad feeling. There's no such thing as a bad or a wrong feeling. And it doesn't make us bad. It's not shameful. I say there's no such thing as an angry person, because that's like saying, oh, well, he's a breathing person. Like we all have anger. We just all have different relationships to our anger. And we really want to all strive to have a healthy relationship to our anger. Of course, we're going to get angry because there's a lot, you know, anger is an outcome of the real and the ideal being, you know, different things. So whenever the real deviates from what's ideal, we're going to get angry or disappointed or some variation of anger. And, you know, of course we're going to have that, because this is, you know, life under the sun. We're going to experience that like 23 hours a day, actually, on a good day. So there's nothing wrong with feeling angry or frustrated or resentful or any of these things. They're just natural human responses to things not being ideal.
Yeah. You just need the tools to be able to handle it and communicate and build the relationships up instead of letting them become an issue that causes breakdown.
Yeah. Like, and to say, what is this anger telling me right now?
Yeah.
How do I need to attune to it and be responsible with this?
Right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been great.
You're welcome, Jerry. It was really fun.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.